Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
Hi, I'm Nick Jensen, also known as Nick Brick. I'm representing Orphan Lug, Rebel Lug, and Windy City Lug.
Well, that's a lot of weight on your shoulders here.
Oh yeah, I'm part of a lot of different groups, a lot of wonderful builders in those groups as well. Today I'm showing for you the LEGO Game Boy Color collection that I built for Brickworld 2023. So, full disclosure, I did not have a Game Boy Color growing up. And in fact, the Game Boy Color that I have for reference off to the side, it was bought the day after the first one of these was built. So,
You're like a fake fan? Is that what you're saying?
A bit of a poser. My first handheld console was a Game Boy Advance. So I played Game Boy Color games growing up, but not on the original console it was for.
So what made you want to do these then?
So the inspiration for this actually was from Windy City Lug Challenge. We do a monthly prompt or seed part challenge, and actually this one was a prompt to build a childhood toy. And I thought, well, a gaming console makes total sense, but I had already made a Game Boy Advance previously for a Rebel Lug challenge. So instead, I decided to make the Game Boy Color, and I based it off of reference images I found online as well as dimensions that were found online. So it was worked off of those instead of an actual Game Boy Color in my hands. And it's generally how I do my other models, like when I do scale gun models from Halo, for example, where you have to use something that's digital because it doesn't actually exist. It's the same concept, but once you have the actual thing in your hands, you get to compare and decide, oh, this worked, oh, this didn't, this was perfectly in scale, this could have been a little better, but I'm really happy with these replicas. So the first one of these I had made was the lime green one, because I just have a lot of lime green pieces from just different like bulks, just bulk sets and all that kind of stuff.
Are you able to pick it up and kind of show different perspectives, or how fragile are these?
They're not too fragile, but I mean, it's still Lego. But here's the Game Boy Color, the first one that I made, with the screen being just an off screen. So you can see its power switch is in the off position, but you can put that into on. And you can also remove the game cartridge out of the back. And it looks like we got Bob on Battlefield. I don't think that was an actual Game Boy Color game. But yeah, and it's got no other functions, but all the buttons and whatnot are in the right place. And one of my favorite techniques on this build was the use of wedge plates made flush with the front to make the speaker in the front here. So those are just like stacked, I think those are the right side wedge plates. And the gaps for the studs, if you were to place them on regular bricks or plates, just looks like the depth of the speakers. And we can kind of compare it with the original. It's not exactly the same, but you get the general idea. It would have been better if we had circular holes, but I think it's like such a cool use of a piece that might as well do it.
No, exactly. And one thing I noticed here is you've got different designs on each screen, right?
I do. So I represented different classic games, and even one that I actually had as a kid on my Game Boy Advance. So the first one, we stand for trans rights, but that's not an actual game, of course. But also the idea of that one is a little bit of a pun. So the original 6 Game Boy Colors, there was also a translucent purple one. But since I can't make it in translucent purple, I can still make something trans. But moving down the line, we got the red Game Boy Color, which is in place of magenta. The limiting piece being that piece for the speaker. It does not come in magenta. So I made it red instead, and that screen is Mario Tennis. It was one of the 2 Game Boy Color games I had as a kid, the other being Lego Stunt Track Challenge or Stunt Rally. It was one of those games. It was a top-down racing game, but I loved Mario Tennis. It was so much fun. I'd restart that game so many times. Down the line, you can't have handheld gaming without Tetris. So on the purple Game Boy, we have a Tetris game. And what was fun with this one was using a white plate with a black square print on one side to form the shape of one of the actual Tetris blocks. So you can't really make any of the Tetris blocks to scale except for the T piece. So it looks like it's got the 3 blocks on top and then 1 block on the underside. And I just kind of made a little bit of a game go in there.
Yeah, you really packed a ton of pieces inside there to create all those patterns.
Yep. And then, of course, down the line, we got the off-screen using silver pieces to kind of simulate that look. And one more down from that, on the yellow Game Boy Color, we have one of the Pokemon games. I forgot which game I used for reference. I don't know which Game Boy Color Pokemon games were, but that's one of them. That's you choosing your starter. So you got the 3 Pokeballs right there on the desk there. You got the professor, and then you got your playable character that I don't know the name of, and I'm going to be corrected in the comments.
So, someone will let us know in the comments.
For sure. Yeah, tell this fake fan what he built. I just build. And the last one is the blue Game Boy, and that is just the startup screen. So let's go ahead and do a comparison for that. It might be hard to see because the Game Boy Color is infamous for having not even a backlit screen. It's so hard to see, but we can try. There's the on switch. And
It's coming through a little bit.
do it one more time. So you can barely see that, but as the Game Boy logo flashes on the screen, it does like a rainbow and then it goes into blue. And I did it as the rainbow showing up. I thought that would look even better than just having just blue squares going across with no lettering. It's close enough.
And then you've also got this fantastic brick-built sign here as well with a variety of types of letters.
Yeah, so I replicated that based on the actual Game Boy Color logo on the original thing. And yeah, so we got 2 different text styles. We got just plain text for the Game Boy, and color makes it kind of looks like it's handwritten. So I tried to go for like a hand-drawn look, like for the R, making it look like it was one brush stroke. And yeah, and I looked up some of the classic Game Boy Color advertisements from back in the day. The whole get into it thing with the C becoming a mouth. It was creepy. I did too much research on this. I mean, maybe too much research and just back off a little bit.
But then for the brick-built ones here, what are some of those pieces you used in there?
In there, I used a bunch of, kind of like hinge pieces, and those are all built sideways going across. And that's generally how I like to do lettering, because you can have like thick strokes and thin strokes based on whether it's going to be the plates forming the shapes or the bricks going outward. And there's some tricky letters, like the M is tricky, the Y is tricky. The Y doesn't seem like it would be tricky at all, but like to be able to space everything and make it still readable. I like doing the lettering aspect of that, so I like to complete the presentation that has a logo or something like that to bring the whole thing together. And I think it works with this whole display curved inward. You get to see them all at the same time.
The presentation looks really nice, but you actually have one more Game Boy over here as well, right?
This one's closer to what I actually had. I had an Arctic blue, translucent blue Game Boy Advance growing up. And this is a closer model to something that I had as a kid. The Game Boy Advance, of course, did not have the backlit screen, but you got to play even more intricate games, and you could play your Game Boy Color games on that thing. So yes, I don't have one for reference, but it's pretty close to the actual size. I actually think it's a little bit bigger. But what's different with this one is actually putting the A and B buttons off to the side with A and B printed tiles. And the start and select buttons as Technic half pins was kind of a fun technique. Unfortunately, this one does not have any working features, like it can't take the cartridge out. But this one was built in a day, so.
So for a day's work.
Yeah, if I go back and rework it, I might be able to get even more detail out of it. But for a day build and just be able to get myself building, flexing those skills a little bit, do something different than the typical gun models, it's a good way to just get the creative juices flowing.
So is this the end of your Game Boy collection, or will we see more models from you in the future, do you think?
Hard to say, but I do like making game consoles in addition to anything else gaming. It's about the way you play as much as what you play.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for taking us through all of these here. Always great to see your work, Nick. And for people who haven't seen your work before, where can they find you online?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at NickBrickBuilds, or on YouTube at NickBrick. And there's a whole video showcasing these Game Boy Colors, as well as free instructions, so you can build the lime green Game Boy, or you can do some part swaps and make whatever color you want.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.